Week 2 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few quarterbacks I would bench this week. The first guy's Carr of the Las Vegas Raiders. So in Week 1, Carr, he had a very good game versus a tough Baltimore defense with 435 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, an interception, and 6 rushing yards. So right here, Carr, he was airing that football out on that Monday Night Football game versus a pretty solid Baltimore Raven defense, even though I know they lost a few guys to injury. But this week it's going to be a harder task, and no way I think he's going to put up even 300 yards in this game here is Carr. At the Pittsburgh Steelers, we saw the Steelers limit Josh Allen and a pretty high-octane Buffalo Bill offense in Buffalo in Week 1. And I think they're going to do the same here for Derek Carr and the Raiders. I think the Raiders are going to have to throw the football a lot. I think the Steelers get off to a quick start in this game. But Derek Carr, throughout the years, his stats are way better at home than he is on the road. And right here, I think the Steelers are going to put pressure on him. They're going to get him, and they're going to shut down on the outside on his receivers, even though I don't think his receiving core is all that great, besides obviously Darren Waller at tight end. So this week, after a big week Carr had in Week 1, I think this week he's a quarterback that fantasy owners should bench him. The second quarterback's Matt Ryan of the Atlanta Falcons. So Matt Ryan, I mentioned him as a drop candidate earlier this week, and he got nothing going in that ball game versus Philadelphia in Week 1. The first drive, he looked solid. Him and Calvin Ridley were hitting. But after that, he did nothing for the rest of the game in Week 1. He finished with only 164 passing yards and 8 rushing yards. So no touchdowns, no interceptions at least, which was a good thing. We had to throw the football a lot. And some fantasy owners, they've already dropped Matt Ryan in 7% of fantasy leagues. So right here, it's another tough matchup here in Week 2 with Tampa Bay. And I just don't see him having that great of a game. I think he'll have a little bit of a better stat line than he did versus Philly, because I could easily see him throw the ball in this one 45 to 50 times. We saw Dak Prescott throw it 58 times in Week 1 versus Tampa Bay Buccaneer defense. So right here, Ryan, he'll probably go for 200 yards, maybe 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions, but I can't trust him. He looks totally different in this offense without Julio Jones. And right here, he's an easy quarterback to bench and drop, in my opinion. And the third and final quarterback I would look to bench this week's Joe Burrow of the Cincinnati Bengals. So Burrow, on paper, looks like a good matchup, especially after Matthew Stafford threw for a huge game versus the Chicago Bear defense. But I think this Bear defense is going to be better at home in Soldier Field here in Week 2. And in Week 1, it was good to see Burrow out there and looking pretty solid. He had 261 passing yards and 2 touchdowns in an overtime victory versus the Minnesota Vikings. But this week at the Chicago Bears, like I mentioned, it's a road game, different atmosphere, obviously. And this Bear pass rush is, in my opinion, better than this Minnesota Viking pass rush. And also the offensive line for the Bengals isn't all that great. So right here, I think this Bear defense could put pressure on Burrow early and often. And I don't see a great performance out of him, anywhere from probably 15 to 20 fantasy points, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but there's better options to start this week at the quarterback position. So I think Burrow has a down game this week, and he's a different quarterback as well on the road. He's not in the league long enough where you could trust this guy to be a top-flight quarterback right now, unless he really breaks out this year. But right now, still coming off injury, still not 100% in my opinion. I will bench Burrow this week, so that's a few quarterbacks I would bench here in Week 2 of the fantasy football season.